Aloha. We have a few more people joining us, but we're going to start because our candidates have a hard stop at 7. Thank you for joining us tonight for the 2020 Mayoral Forum on Ag and Food Issues. I'm Denise Yamaguchi, Executive Director of the Hawaii Agricultural Foundation. It is my pleasure to host tonight's forum in partnership with the Hawaii Farm Bureau Federation. I would like to thank our 2 mayoral candidates, Keith Amemiya and Rick Blangiardi, for agreeing to be here and sharing their views with you. The goal of tonight's program is to offer all of you a chance to hear from our Honolulu mayoral candidates on their views on local agriculture, from our farmers, ranchers, and fishermen, to our food supply chain of growers, producers, distributors, retailers, restaurants, and more. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce Brian Miyamoto, Executive Director of the Hawaii Farm Bureau Federation, who will say a few words.
Thank you, Denise. On behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau, our President, Randy Cabral, our Board of Directors, our Oahu County Farm Bureau Presidents, and our 1,800 farm family members, I would like to thank Mr. Blangiardi and Mr. Amemiya for participating in tonight's 2020 Mayoral Forum on Ag and Food Issues for the City and County of Honolulu. As the largest statewide general agriculture organization, the Hawaii Farm Bureau supports all farmers and ranchers. We believe that agriculture is about food, feed, fiber, fuel, and floriculture. We support all farm sizes, growing practices, and commodities. Our members, partners, and supporters are excited to hear from both of you about your views on agriculture and your policies to help with the many challenges that our farmers, ranchers, fishers, restaurants, and our food supply chain partners face. With that said, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Devon Nekoba.
Thank you very much, Brian, Denise. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. It is nice to be here. And thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here. We appreciate you giving us this time. Now, for tonight's forum, I'd just like to go over some of the house rules. First, this is not a debate, it's a forum. So there will be no rebuttals. There's no back and forth. You're basically going to be answering each question individually, okay? Next, each candidate will have a chance to answer the 5 questions we've pre-selected and briefed them on. Next, each candidate has 3 minutes to respond to each question and will be timed with the timer on the screen that's behind me. When you hit 1 minute, I'm gonna do this. When you hit 30 seconds, I'm gonna do this. And when you're out of time, I will do this, and we're gonna mute your microphone, just letting you know. In accordance with that, responses over 3 minutes are gonna be muted. So just so you're clear on that. There will be time for an audience Q&A later this evening. So if you do have any questions out there and you're tuning us in today, if you'd like to ask your candidates, please enter them into the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom window. All right, gentlemen, if you're ready, we're going to begin. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Honolulu mayoral candidates, Mr. Keith Amemiya and Mr. Rick Blangiardi. Thank you both, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now I'll call on each of you to make an introduction before we dive into the forum, and you have 2 minutes for your opening statement. Keith, we'll begin with you.
All right. Well, thank you, Devon. Thank you, Denise, and thank you, Brian, for this opportunity. This is an unprecedented time for all of us, and I know that the farming industry, the agricultural industry, and of course the restaurant industry and all the related industries have been hit especially hard by COVID-19. As your mayor, I will do whatever I can to help your industry along. It's going to be a tough time, but I know if we stay together, work together, we will get through this, hopefully stronger and better than ever. I commend the Farm Bureau for their Farm to Car program. I commend the Agricultural Foundation and Denise and her efforts with her Food A Go-Go program. But we can and must do more. The city can continue the plans that it already has in place in terms of supporting restaurants, whether it's a small business recovery fund or helping restaurants expand their footprint by allowing dining outdoors and on sidewalks and other areas. And of course, we can help our farmers with continued subsidies as well. So I look forward to this opportunity to explain more how I can help your industries and how I can make them better. And thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Keith. Appreciate that. Mr. Blangiardi, your turn.
Yep. Good evening. Thank you, and really appreciate this opportunity. And I have to say, we've been involved in a lot of Zoom calls on a lot of topics, and this one was the most challenging of all, and actually opened my eyes quite a bit to the road ahead as a mayoral candidate. So, while I may not have all the answers, and probably wish tonight I could ask more questions than you're going to allow me to, it has certainly stretched my thinking. And I think I want to say that we're all going through the most extraordinary period of time, and the people on this call tonight have been impacted perhaps maybe even more than most. So as I began to think about this from the standpoint of what a mayor can do, I think it's clear that we have the opportunity to define what the ag of the future is going to look like. We're at that crossroads. I think the city can also be the leader in establishing these goals, both for the city and actually the entire state. I really began to understand, because I always thought that ag, to be honest with you, was a state issue pretty much controlled by the state, based on countless stories in my former life at Hawaii News Now and the stories we did. It always seemed to be state related. But I believe we can change zoning to allow agriculture to thrive in locations never before utilized. Over the last couple of weeks, I've gone to a couple of urban farms, and I've been really, really impressed with not only the yield, but the people and what they're doing and the contribution it makes. So I'm really excited about learning more and the road ahead and what we can possibly get done. But this is something I want to stay very committed to going forward as mayor. Thank you. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you very much. Rick, appreciate that. All right, let's get started with the questions, gentlemen. Now remember, you have 3 minutes to answer each question. And to be fair, you'll each have an opportunity to take turns answering first, okay? Our first question. Many have said that it is important to diversify our economy and that there is a need to further expand our local agricultural sector. What are 3 specific actions you would take in your administration to encourage and expand farm businesses on Oahu? We'll start with Rick.
All right, thank you. Well, look, I think this time of the pandemic has taught us both as a city and a state important lessons, which if we ignore, it'll be almost as tragic as the pandemic itself. And one of the lessons that comes to mind for me and has been is the effects of climate change and our inability to self-sustain and our need for collective resiliency. So I had the honor and the pleasure of serving on the City Resiliency Steering Committee as a result of the 2016 Charter Amendment, and our work product was the OLA Resilience Strategy of 2019. So I'm absolutely committed to Action 10, which was to promote new agricultural models for economic and food security. And we know that almost 90% of our food is imported, which is amazing to me. So this pandemic has magnified our reliance on imports, especially food, and how we need to change that. So I would ensure that the Oahu Food Policy Council is engaged as we recommended. And this is to guide me as mayor as to how best to ignite a local food and urban farming industry. And I really believe in the future role of urban farming. Like I said, the last couple of weeks have been really very eye-opening for me. I think the city needs to do its part to assist in food security and resiliency. So we need to continue to support the agricultural liaison position presently held by Dr. Po Young Lai to assist the city administration in interfacing with all related agencies. I think he does a really good job. I also think the city can look at making underutilized excess lands available. I think that's really important for agricultural use, and especially for women and some of the minority startups, some of whom I've just talked to in these recent endeavors. So last thing I'll say is we need to create clear strategic collaboration between the city and the accelerators and incubator groups working in the local food space to encourage mentorship, adoption of technology, and to find new pathways to investment for local food entrepreneurs. I think this is a great combination of our food sustenance, and at the same time, a really vital part of our economic recovery. And I'm really excited about the role the mayor can play in this in making these things happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rick. I appreciate it. Keith, your turn. Did you want me to repeat the question, or are you okay?
No, I mean, basically the question is the same, right? 3 specific actions to take to expand farming on Oahu?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, so I'm ready.
Okay.
You know, in a nutshell, the 3 barriers to our local agricultural sector are labor, land, and capital. In terms of labor, we need to increase the availability of farm labor. The farm labor workforce is getting much older. The average age of a farmer is 60 and over, and there's not a lot of younger farmers to fill the void. We can help increase the farm labor by prioritizing it in our schools. There's a lot of educational programs that are very successful. We need to build upon those, whether it's Kua'aina in Maunawili or the Kukua Kalihi Valley project in Kalihi Valley that Dr. Durrell has successfully implemented. We need to support those programs and get our students to be engaged and learn and love farming from a much earlier age. In terms of workforce development, let's partner with the universities on creating more farming opportunities for our young students. A lot of students or young people don't necessarily want to work in the office. They want to work outdoors. Well, we need to educate them, expose them to these types of farming opportunities that they might be interested in. In terms of the city has a Workforce Hawaii division that helps in terms of workforce development and training. This is a prime opportunity during this COVID-19 pandemic to have students or people in the tourism industry, for example, who probably won't get their job back or won't get it back for a long time. They need to look at another job, another industry. This is the time to utilize the city's Workforce Hawaii division to train people to enter the farming industry. In terms of land, obviously we're on an island, we're land constrained. It's important to provide more affordable and favorable land opportunities, and the city can help in that regard. In terms of capital, that's always an issue for farmers. I'd like to provide the farmers with much more low interest loans, grants, and other community-based finance solutions. Let's use the CARES Act money to help our farmers as well. There's $387 million that the city got. It's having problems, if you will, in getting that money out. And one of the areas I want to help is our farmers in terms of getting them the relief they need, the capital they need, whether it's to expand their farms or to create new farming opportunities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Gentlemen, just a quick pause. Is it okay that I'm calling you Keith and Rick? I've known both of you, so I feel bad. Some people may be getting upset with me because I'm speaking to you as if you're my friends, but I just want to make sure that you're okay with that. I'm happy to call you Mr. Amemiya and Mr. Blangiardi if you prefer. But.
No. Actually, I've been called a lot of other things other than Rick and Mr. Blangiardi, so I'm good with Rick.
Okay. You got it. I just wanted to make sure I got that out of the way, just in case people say, "Why wasn't he calling them by their?" You know?
No. It's been a long day, and I appreciate the informality. So thank you.
Okay. Welcome. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. All right. Our next question. The local food supply system has become imbalanced with the government shutdowns and physical distancing in local restaurants and bars, which has affected our farmers, ranchers, and fishermen. We hear that growers are having to change their growing strategy to accommodate more consumer buying of commodity versus restaurant buying of specialty crops. Under your administration, how would you look to create more demand on the food service side so our farmers can get the highest price per pound for their products on Oahu? Rip, we'll start with you.
Okay, what we've been talking about throughout the course of our campaigning as a result of COVID has been the concern about the exodus of people leaving. And it was even reported this past Sunday. And we've had negative growth as a city for the last several years. And that's been daunting enough, to be honest with you, with the brain drain and affordability. But actually, with the result of not having any work for people and seeing younger people leaving because of no opportunity, it's of real concern. So I think that this is somewhat germane to that. So this is the statistic that I learned that guides me is that if we shift just 10% of our food production home, we're going to return $313 million to our economy. And I believe we're not thinking in these kinds of terms. So I believe in order to increase demand, we must have supply of the products that the consumers and the restaurants want to buy. So if more of a younger generation begins to look upon agriculture in terms of their future as business entrepreneurs, I believe that they'll be able to get the highest price because of the natural demand that they will create as entrepreneurial farmers. So as a businessman, I've rejuvenated failing companies. I know how to incentivize people and an industry. I may not know the crops. I'll admit, I may not know the crops, which will bring the highest price. But I do know that as small businesses, farmers will find those crops. And the city has a great opportunity to facilitate and assist the food industry in this endeavor. So one of the solutions I like and we read about is agriculture of the future must appeal to the next generation, right, to carry forward. And what will happen is if we encourage and promote technology in agriculture and the concept of urban farming. I think this is a fascinating opportunity for us for all that we've talked about in diversifying our economy, but maybe even more importantly, to create jobs that will keep our young people home. So I think addressing the demand for specialty crops, per what you said, we must move quickly in our economic recovery and get our restaurants safely back in business as soon as possible. And I think that will bring back demand. I'm really concerned about the restaurant trade. I've had a couple of meetings with them. It's a big business, $6.5 billion, you know, over 100,000 people employed, and it's really been hammered. And actually, quite honestly, on a going forward basis, the prospects are not looking good. So I want to be very supportive of that food supply, new crops, and all the commerce that come out of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rick. Keith, before you begin, my apologies. I was supposed to have you go first, so I'm going to give you a chance to go first on the next one, okay? Sorry about that. My apologies. So Keith, we'll look to your answer now.
Well, you know, COVID-19 has taught us that we've been over-reliant on tourism for far too long and that we haven't diversified our economy. You know, among other things, we saw with the impact of COVID-19 that our food security issues were exposed. We saw many empty grocery store shelves during the first stay-at-home order, and it really emphasized the need to expand and diversify our industry to other areas like agriculture, aquaculture, and renewable energy. In terms of agriculture, again, it'll improve our food security, but it'll also boost our economy. I've been on the campaign trail for about 13 months now, and I had the opportunity to visit many communities and many farms, like Osuji Farms in Hawaii Kai. Mr. Osuji has done an incredible job of growing high quality produce for restaurants and even now the general public because of the lessened demand due to the shutdown of the hotel industry and lots of restaurants, at least from a dining in standpoint. And what I learned was that obviously high quality produce can be farmed and grown here on Oahu, that it's tastier, it's better, and it keeps the money here. Obviously, we also want to increase food security and make it stronger because bringing in 90% of our food from out of state is simply unacceptable, and it's too risky if we have another situation like an extended pandemic or a natural disaster that prevents food supply from coming to Oahu. We need to partner with more larger institutional entities like schools, universities, hospitals, and senior care facilities. As the mayor, I will make sure that we try to partner with these groups as much as possible. And then finally, I would work with our newly hired food security and sustainability manager, Dexter Kishida, on ways we can assist and grow the agriculture industry and the farming industry in general, and partner them with our restaurant industry and the general public. I know Dexter from his prior job as the head of the DOE's Food Services Division. He did a great job there. He's obviously well connected there. So that's another natural tie-in where we can help the farming and agricultural industry and help our food security issues as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Keith. Appreciate it. Our next question. There's a conflict of land use policy on the use of agricultural land between renewable energy and farming. And there are several renewable projects proposed on agriculture zone lands that have been approved or are in the planning process. What is your position on those? Keith, we'll take your answer first.
Well, obviously both industries are important, so it's incumbent upon the mayor and his administration to bring both sides to the table, bring other interested parties to the table, like the affected communities, and try to find a common ground between the two industries. You know, one of the things that I would emphasize and promote is that one of the priorities I mentioned earlier is to build up our agricultural industry. We're over-reliant on tourism, and there's so many benefits to build up and grow and support our agricultural industry. We need to focus on the higher producing lands, the more desirable lands for agriculture. And if there's less desirable lands, that's where we can pivot and have renewable energy projects sited there. The reason that they had renewable energy projects on high yielding agricultural lands is because there wasn't the demand. But as mayor, I'll make sure that we increase the demand for agricultural products and farming and the agricultural industry in general. There's also the opportunity to have both on the same properties. As many of the people in this audience know, there have been workable situations where there's a solar farm and livestock. The solar farms provide shade and cover for the livestock. The livestock can eat and clear the land, so to speak. And so I'm in favor of looking at more of those partnerships between the renewable energy industry and the agricultural industry. I know that the American Farmland Trust has come out with a smart solar siting principles that have guidelines on whether to use property for renewable energy or agricultural use, or to also find ways that they can partner and coexist on the same land. So it can be done. We can accommodate and support both the renewable energy industry and the agricultural industry. And I'm committed to support both of them because both are important for our long-term viability and future here on Oahu. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. Rick?
Yeah.
Your turn.
Well, you know, as I said earlier, I'm in uncharted waters. I've been learning a lot. So I've been told, you know, there's always been a tension because of land use classifications and the fact that agricultural lands have far too long been classified, not due to their productivity in farming, but because it's defined more as a catch-all category. So after a lot of discussion, this has to stop, and my administration will give classifications a thorough look over. Prime agricultural land with high production potential should be prioritized for farming. So although some say, as I understand it, some say that agriculture is a state issue, but I'm rejecting that notion and believe it is equally a city issue from what I've been hearing lately and what I've been learning. Once we begin to recognize how agriculture will evolve over time within the urban farming framework. I'm really excited about this urban farming framework. Okay, so in other words, future generations will not necessarily want to farm the way our ancestors farmed in the ground in the past. And there are a couple of things that I want to mention. First is the Boston model with freight containers used to grow hydroponic produce. Not only is this method of farming attractive to the generation, which has grown up with technology, it's also convenient and very adaptable. And what is needed is the political commitment to see it implemented in the use of the city resources, along with our university, the state and federal governments investing collectively. And secondly, another model I like is to look for a win-win situation with the potential for the multi-use or dual use of land that harnesses renewable energy while producing crops. This partner could be vital in boosting rural economies and helping to meet Hawaii's renewable energy goals. In other states, there have been beehives located on solar farms, probably not saying anything that this audience doesn't already know, where honey producers keep bees at solar farms, where developers seeded native plants underneath and around the panels. Now, there are also elevated solar panel arrays that provide shade to crops that otherwise could not grow successfully in the region. I love that kind of stuff. So let's think outside the box, save our best lands for agriculture, and look for new ways of farming and multi-use or dual use of lands that grow crops while harnessing renewable energy. I think if we're going to be, and I've said this often throughout in our campaign, and realize where we are in the first year of the third decade of the 21st century, what greater opportunity than this to really advance ourselves on a going forward basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rick. We move to question number 4. And once again, just to balance things out, I apologize. I let Rick answer twice first. So now on the next 2 questions, the third and the fourth question, I'll have Keith go first.
You answer this one twice. That would be okay. You could do this.
Sorry about that. Okay. So our next question, pesticides and biotechnology are critical tools that farmers need to produce a safe and marketable product and remain globally competitive. It is also vital to control human health diseases and maintain our environment against invasive species. There have been efforts to ban or further restrict pesticides in the county. What is your position on this issue? And what is your position on the role of the county versus state and federal regulations? Keith, I'll begin with you.
Well, I think most people in this audience know that the Ninth Circuit has already overruled county laws and say that they're preempted by state and federal laws. In particular, the Ninth Circuit affirmed the lower court's ruling against bans of genetically engineered crops on Maui and the Big Island and restrictions on pesticide spraying on Kauai. So really, this county has no jurisdiction, at least not specifically, over this type of issue. But you know, like always, I would bring all the interested parties to the table and see what we can do in terms of finding a reasonable compromise. The bottom line is we need to find a solution so we can grow more agriculture here in Hawaii, here on Oahu in particular. It's important for our economy. It's also important for our food security. Another issue that's similar to the pesticide issue and the concerns that it brings about is climate change. That's often forgotten as an issue that affects agriculture. We already see the effects of climate change on our farming industry, and we need to do whatever we can to address that. One of the first acts I want to take as mayor is to enact a climate action plan. It'll be a roadmap on how to address climate change immediately. As I've told people throughout the campaign trail, COVID-19 may be the crisis of the moment, but climate change is the crisis of our lifetime. We can't keep kicking that can down the road. Our current generations are counting on it, but so are our future generations. We owe it to our future generations to do whatever we can to mitigate against climate change. Climate change can affect farming, as we all know, in so many ways, whether it's higher temperatures, whether it's the higher prevalence of superstorms or rain bombs or extreme weather conditions, and the rising sea levels as well. So, not only do I want to make sure we address the pesticide issue, we also need to address the climate change issue as mayor. I mean, the bottom line, we want to grow the farming industry. We want to help the local economy. My wife and I and everyone in this audience, and I'm sure Rick as well, love eating local, love supporting local restaurants and local farmers. And so I'll do everything I can as mayor to support your industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. Okay, Rick, your turn.
You know, one of the things that was afforded me in my role at Hawaii News Now was a really great lens on a lot of different stories and things that we learned on. And certainly the whole issue of pesticides and bans was in our news quite often. But one of the things that I'm really proud of just before leaving was the ability to go out and raise $750,000 to produce 3 one-hour documentaries, 2 of which have been done. And this all happened after I left. I retired in January. On climate change. We didn't do it for ratings or anything else. We did it for educational purposes, because I can assure you that as an adult, if I talk to another adult about climate change, it's one kind of conversation, but if you talk to a child, it's another. So we really want to educate our public on what we're feeling with. So to this question, I would normally prefer statewide consistency on regulatory matters like bans on pesticides, but home rule also allows some counties to be more restrictive, not less than the state. So the concern is that county by county regulation disrupts statewide operations, or at least complicates it. So it certainly complicates statewide operations and economies of scale. There's no question. So in other words, this could come at a price. I'm aware that the state passed a law, Act 45 in 2018, that prohibits the use of anyone using restricted use pesticides, or RUPs, to report to the Department of Agriculture, and prohibits the use of RUPs on or within 100 feet of a school while class is in session. We did a lot of stories on this. There will no doubt there'll be future state legislation restricting the use of pesticides. So that means all the more we need to look at other ways to protect the crops and our consumers. For example, we haven't even discussed how climate change is affecting our ability to farm in the traditional way. We did, one of the specials is all on that. So more and more you hear smaller and mid-sized farmers leaving because the rains and the winds they're experiencing in recent times are wiping out crops. Never even heard the term before of a rain bomb, but we've certainly seen the effects of it. So those excessive waters also challenge farmers with contamination and our own food security issues. So in light of that, as island dwellers and wanting to become food sustainable, understanding the need for that and the importance, I'm committed to working with you, all of you on this call tonight, as we collectively define the balance between traditional farming, pesticide bans, and defining, I hope, a new agriculture for Oahu. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. All right, we're at our fifth question. Farmers and ranchers have lost hundreds and thousands of dollars per year to theft and vandalism. The HBD has done all they can do with limited manpower and resources for many years. While previous administrations have attempted to address this issue, how will you reduce ag crime in our rural communities? Rick, I'll begin with you.
You know, I wasn't even aware until I was doing a little research and study on this, how much ag crime there was. So I'm certain that it must be frustrating to see tens of thousands of citations that were just issued recently for quarantine violations. At the same time, seemingly a lack of commitment for the protection of the products that you grow from theft. So I'll work with you to change that. First, we need to increase awareness of agricultural crimes and to ask for the public support. I'm going to say it again, I was totally unaware. I think communities must increase awareness of the seriousness of the issue. Report what you see, just as in domestic violence. Farmers must make it difficult for a thief or a trespasser to enter onto or steal from your property. I think a farmer has an obligation to do that. So this could include the use of fencing, signage, motion sensors, ample lighting, security cameras, or even private security near high-valued commodity areas, dogs, and anything else strategically placed in secured storage containers. I would be for, if we can, I want to look at that, providing some financial incentives to enable farmers to be able to do that in order to protect their crops. I also think the community must learn to report any and all suspicious activity to HPD. Document the date, time, and location along with the description of the suspects or a vehicle and the direction of travel. When I talk to HPD about it, a lot of this stuff is inconclusive and doesn't get followed up on. And it just seems to be, it's just sort of happening. So if you can provide photographs or video and then request that the officer whom you contact contacts you. So if you find someone selling suspected stolen goods, provide the name of the vendor or business attempting to buy or sell stolen goods. And then I think secondly, Honolulu County can ask the legislature to increase fines and penalties for agricultural theft. I think we can really go there. I think we need to be heavier on the enforcement once I really understood how wide scale this was. So I would be absolutely willing to go there. I mean, I think enforcement is going to be a big deterrent on some of this because right now it's almost like it lacks enforcement and accountability and you're at the mercy. So agricultural crimes could be considered theft in the second degree, which is a Class C felony right now. I think we can do better. I know we can do better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rick. I appreciate it. Keith, your turn.
Well, one of the problems about crime in general on Oahu is that there's a high vacancy rate in HPD right now. Depending on who you ask, it's approximately 20 to 25% of HPD officer positions are not filled. We need to do what we can to fill them because our officers are stretched too thin as it is right now. We also need to increase our community policing. Even with full staffing, there's just not enough police officers to cover everything and anything across our communities, including our farming communities, quite frankly. So let's beef up things. We also need to increase the penalties for agricultural theft. Clearly, it's not a strong enough deterrence for the people who are stealing from our farms, and so we need to make the punishment much greater so that they'll think twice before doing such a crime again. There's also projects or plans or policies and programs in place on other islands like Maui and Hawaii Island, where the Department of Agriculture has agriculture investigators on staff. They will be able to assist and supplement what the police department's already doing. Those people on staff, the agriculture investigators, sole job will be to investigate ag-related crime. That's something that, again, has been done on the neighbor islands. Let's look at piloting that project here and see if that helps in terms of reducing the crimes on our farms. We also should look at cluster farm dwellings and allow the additional dwellings to be built on farms or nearby farms so that the workers of these farms can live right on the property. That will be another deterrent to more agricultural crimes that currently exist because it's hard when only the farm owner and his or her family lives on the property. And so by having additional workers living on the property, I think will provide a greater deterrence to these crimes that the farms are now facing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Keith, appreciate your answer. Gentlemen, we are at the end of our 5 questions, and you have been awesome. I haven't had to mute you once, so good job. We are sailing through these. At this point in time, I'd like to get to our audience questions that we've received. And once again, we're going to be alternating. So Keith, I'm going to begin with you. As you know, there are not high profit margins in farming, and with every crop, farmers face risks of drought, pests, disease, and market disruptions. Farmers are brave heroes in many ways, and one of these risks can be reduced with access to low-cost, reliable sources of irrigation water. Yet, there is often push and tug between farmers' use of stream waters and leaving waters in the streams for stream life and other ecological benefits. Yet, here's a source of water that is not appropriate for domestic use unless treated, and would otherwise flow to the ocean and be lost. So, how do you think a balance is best struck between the needs of agriculture and environmental concerns?
Well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. You talked about balance, and so I would engage the stakeholders that are involved, the competing interests for the water resources. You know, water is especially precious here on Oahu and the rest of the islands that make up the state of Hawaii. We live in an island state, and so we have to be very careful how we utilize those resources. It's a tough situation, and so again, I think it's important to bring our stakeholders to the table. I think for a long time, our farmers have been on the short end of the stick in terms of receiving the necessary water supply to maximize the usage of their farms and the productivity of their farms. So I'm open to helping them in any way I can to get access to more water. It's a complicated issue, especially on Oahu, and I know Maui has a lot of issues, and it's lasted for decades, if you will. So anyway, that's pretty much how I feel. I think that it can be worked out between the various interest groups and stakeholders, and so as mayor, I'll see whatever I can do to address those issues. Now, I'll also add that, you know, it's not as much a city issue, that it's more a state issue, but I stand ready to assist and help and support our farmers wherever I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Okay, Rick.
Same question. Okay. Well, I think, you know, kind of the theme of what we've been trying to say through the 5 questions is this understanding of the city's involvement in agriculture, and really, quite honestly, on where we are at this present time, lessons learned from this pandemic, you know, the opportunities we have both from an agricultural standpoint and, quite honestly, from a business standpoint. As I said earlier, just shifting 10% of our crops is $313 million. So, you know, money makes the world go round. So I think if we can provide access to land, we can draw in capital markets. And if we can draw in capital markets with access to land, we ought to be able to then create water, you know, in different levels of water, right? There's drinking water, then there's water that's used for farming, and there are different things we can do within that. But I think we need to approach this as a business opportunity, but based on absolute essential need and where we are. Look, we're island dwellers. Climate change is real. We've talked about it now through a couple of questions. We need to be changing behaviors and doing things, and not just doing other irrigation projects elsewhere or other things that we have to do to mitigate the effects, but certainly in how we farm. And especially, if possible, to attract, as I said earlier tonight, the business, the entrepreneurial, the younger people that want to get involved in farming, using technology, using less water, hydroponics, et cetera. You know, but I think, you know, land is premium. We talk about it all the time in the real estate market. So as in the city, if we could provide zoning and access to land, I really believe we can attract the financial markets. And I think with that gives us some great viability. And as I said before, it has to be collective. It has to be in partnership with our university. The University of Hawaii is a great resource. It has to be in conjunction with our state and even federal levels. But I think we've got a great opportunity here to kind of change how things have been done historically. We're at that crossroads, and this pandemic and where we are at this point in time just really sets the stage. So I'm really excited to see what we can do to expand that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. All right, gentlemen, our next question. Building permits are one of the challenges facing farmers and ranchers that want to build supporting infrastructures. That would be greenhouses, cooling facilities, warehouses, things like that for their businesses. How will you make the building permit process more efficient for farming? Rick, we'll start with you.
Well, this is something Keith and I have been asked all the time. We talk about it, and we happen to be in agreement on it. We acknowledge that today on DPP is really, it's a systemic problem, and it's been well defined and well acknowledged for a long time. And just last year, the city did a huge audit and really delivered a lot of findings. It was presented in the first week of January to Kirk. We don't know how much has gotten done, but given COVID and everything else, I'm not so sure a whole lot. But it's going to start with fixing DPP once and for all, starting with leadership, modernization, staffing, perhaps compensation, processes on what's done. I mean, I think the thing needs to be turned inside out. So I'm looking forward to appointing a leader in there who's really of like mind with me on with respect to being held accountable to do what everybody says is sort of the holy grail. You know, can you fix DPP? And it's not going to be a quick fix. It's not an overnight fix. But in this pandemic and in this economic recovery, where we are tasked with the challenge of balancing public health and safety with economic recovery, something like that has to happen. We don't even have an option on that. And I think we have to be really strong and have the political will to make sure that that happens. So as I said before, it's all there. It's been laid out. It's not a mystery, but it's going to take not just political will. It's going to take determination. It's going to take patience, understanding, innovation. You asked me earlier about, you know, possibly, well, you didn't ask me. That was a different Zoom call I was on privatization. I'm sorry. It's been a lot. Okay. But I mean, I just think we need to be in that place where we're embracing that intellectual capital and saying, what are the ideas and the ideas that need to work? Because we can't, there's nothing right now about where we are that says preserving the status quo in a broken function like DPP is going to get us anywhere near where we need to go for the safety and well-being and the future economy of this island, our island. Okay. So I could talk about it for a long time. I'm sure Keith is going to pick up where I left off. But DPP has got to happen. It's going to happen in the construction business. It certainly has to happen in the agricultural and farming business. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rick. Appreciate it. Okay, Keith, your turn.
Well, there's a lot of controversial issues facing the city, whether it's affordable housing, homelessness, Kahuku wind farms, Sherwood Forest, or the Alamana Park Playground, where the public is more or less split in half. But it's interesting that when it comes to DPP, everyone is on the same page, whether it's the community at large, the construction industry, environmentalists, the developers, and the like. Everyone thinks DPP needs to improve, and so do Rick and I. In terms of DPP, we know that an extensive audit report was issued this past January. So we know all the problems, we know all the issues, we know all the solutions. It's going to take a political will. It's going to take new leadership. It's going to take bold and dynamic leadership to make this happen. And I'm committed to making this happen. There's 3 areas that need to be improved at DPP. The first is increase the workforce in DPP. They're clearly overworked and understaffed, and that's a big reason that permits are taking so long to be approved. Secondly, the technology is far outdated at DPP. Even people within DPP or outside of DPP will tell you that they need to greatly increase their technology and upgrade it so that permits can be processed faster. And third, let's approve the permits faster and focus more on the inspection and enforcement on the tail end. There's a lot of safeguards in the application process to ensure that the vast majority of permits are valid and ready to be approved right away. Let's not delay all the permits for 1 or 2 permits that may require further investigation. Again, let's focus on the inspection and enforcement afterwards so construction could commence much sooner. It's not only a source of frustration for the applicants who have to wait 1 to 2 years in some cases for their projects to be approved, but it's also an economic impact, especially for farmers or even developers of large-scale projects. Every lost month because a permit's not approved costs millions of dollars to the developer. It's the reason many developers back out of projects, so they simply can't wait too long. It's also a lost opportunity for jobs, whether it's construction workers or other people who are related to the development of a project. So PPP is an issue and it'll be a priority of mine as mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. Okay, gentlemen, our second question here. As the executive leader of the county, how will you facilitate work with the state to create a vibrant and sustainable farm-to-school food pipeline? Keith, we'll begin with you.
Well, that's a program that I support. I've been involved in it and I'm familiar with it. I learned about it primarily through my work with Mrs. Ige and some other people. I'm part of the school breakfast advisory board, whose mission is to greatly increase the participation rate of public school students in the breakfast and lunch program at school. We have one of the lowest rates in the country, and so you know, our goal is to greatly increase participation in programs like that. By increasing participation in programs like that, you increase the opportunities for farmers to provide food to the public school system and other places. So it's important for the city to interface with the state and make sure we're all on the same page. We're still a fairly small island state where everyone's interconnected. Everyone can't work in silos. Everyone needs to work together. And so it only makes sense that the state and city work together to address this issue. There's a perfect storm of circumstances that give me hope that the that the state and the city can work well together, with the recent hiring by the city of Dexter Kishida to head their food security division, when he just most recently was the head of the DOE Food Services Division for so many years. So I'm optimistic that there will be a viable partnership with the state and the city in order to help our food security issues and support our farming industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. Rick.
Well, I'm not as versed in that program, but this really does come under, as we've talked about tonight, lessons learned from this pandemic. And clearly, if we're talking about feeding our school kids, I mean, we've seen that time and again right now with respect to providing food for our youngsters. There's been different things with the school situation and families in need. One of the things that I got to do and really appreciate over the last 18 years is having been a member of the Hawaii Food Bank, and realizing that, on average every month we were giving out between 800,000 and 1 million pounds of food a month, which is about 12 million pounds of food a year, feeding about 285,000 people. When you see that and you realize, and that's really that Alice group, that's for the most part, 50% of the people working paycheck to paycheck, just trying to keep a roof over their heads. And you realize how essential that food is, and having food available to them, there's nothing more noble than that. And the same thing when kids are in school. I remember I haven't even talked to Christina about it, but I remember talking to Catherine Matayoshi before she left in the DOE as superintendent over 3 years ago. And she told me there were 4,500 kids who were homeless in the DOE. Forget the point in time count. And so many of those kids were going to school just to have food. So, this is about as profound as it gets. What I said, whether we're feeding the hungry through a food bank or providing food for our kids, I'm going to do anything and everything I can do. And I think there's a real sense of awareness for me now about what the mayor can do to work with the state on all of these kinds of programs. I mean, how many times do we have to say it about our need to be self-sustaining, but more than anything, taking care of our own local people and making sure we don't have shortages that way. So if there have been programs in place that need some support and cooperation or anything else, I want to be that kind of a facilitator. I want to be able to help do whatever we can do to take care of those things and not make it difficult. So this is one of those things I'm excited about. I don't think it gets any more, as I just said a moment ago, any more noble or profound than making sure people have something to eat. I mean, that is really, from a humanitarian standpoint, that's about as good as it gets. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rick. Appreciate it. Gentlemen, we're at our last question for this evening. The Honolulu County Bill 65 was recently introduced by Councilmember Manahan. Bill 65 will grant the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability and Resiliency, OCCSR, broad powers and oversight which will increase bureaucratic costs for the agricultural industry, the hotel industry, and the visitor industry, just to name a few. So could you please share your thoughts on Bill 65? Rick?
Well, I'm not really aware of Bill 65, so that's right up front, okay? But I am very aware of increased costs as a result of climate change. And, I think that we have to kind of come to a meeting point on a going forward basis, especially after the impact of this pandemic and the economic ruin that we're in. And so while I appreciate laws, in some cases here, we have to have a better meeting ground with our environmentalists because we're not in a place. We've talked repeatedly, both Keith and myself, about not raising property taxes as it relates to the rail and other kinds of things. Some of these conditions right now, whether it's even in building affordable housing or other things, are not well timed. And I think we need to be prudent and practical about the laws that we have in place and what we can enforce and not do. And if we have to defer some things as we work our way through economic recovery, then I think people are gonna have to be willing to listen and look at that. We certainly don't want to do anything that's egregious to harm this place. I'm all for preserving everything we possibly can. But some of these rules from the environmentalists have been a real overreach. The council, just on Bill 40, on the plastics ban, was not really well done. And there was a big human outcry from the business community because they just couldn't even meet those deadlines. To me, it was a council at the time not really well informed on the economics of commerce. So again, I'm going to say it, I don't really know that much about Bill 65, but I certainly know about some of the things that are being imposed, and across the board, it could just be a bridge too far at this point in time. And we're going to need some mediation, some understanding to make it less onerous right now, because first and foremost, as I've said repeatedly tonight, economic recovery is our top priority. And I think, quite honestly, at least from my perspective, it's redefined the role of being mayor for the longest time that I can possibly imagine. That is how extensive the impact of this has been. And so we need to rethink some of that stuff to make sure we're practical and we're moving in the right direction for all parties concerned. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Rick. Keith?
Could you repeat the question one more time, Devon?
Not a problem. Honolulu County Bill 65 was recently introduced by Councilmember Monahan. Bill 65 will grant the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency broad powers and oversight, which will increase bureaucratic costs for the agricultural industry, the hotel industry, the visitor industry, just to name a few. Could you please share your thoughts on Bill 65?
Well, I'm not super familiar with that bill either, but I don't like a bill that will increase bureaucratic costs for any industry. So I would work with the city council and find out and learn more about the purpose behind the bill. I would bring together the industries that are impacted and feel that bureaucratic costs will rise because, we certainly can't increase costs for our farming and restaurant and hotel industries during this pandemic when they're already suffering. So I would have to find out more about them. But my understanding of Bill 65 is that there are certain elements that I am in favor of. Again, it's enacting a climate action plan that will provide a roadmap or guidelines that have the force of law to make sure that we address climate change sooner than later. We've waited too long, as I've mentioned, to address climate change. And if we don't, it's going to create irreparable harm to our environment, but it's also going to create economic damage to our many important industries like agriculture if we don't address it. So I'm, again, not as familiar with Bill 65 myself, but I do know that there are elements of the bill that I think can be productive and helpful to the agricultural industry and the farming industry in particular, in that it, for example, if I'm not mistaken, advocates the launching of an Oahu Food Policy Council. I think that can only help the agriculture and farming industries by having them have a seat at the table to decide and talk about all things related to food. So in the end, I would just have to work with the council and the affected industries and make sure that any law that is passed doesn't unduly impact them.
Okay, thank you very much, Keith. Well, that wraps up the Q&A portion of tonight's forum. We're almost out of time. We're like right at the edge here. So before we sign off, I'd like to invite our candidates to share some some closing thoughts with all of you. I almost made it to the end. All right. So each candidate, I'll give you 2 minutes. We'll begin actually with Keith doing the alternating thing. So Keith, please.
Sure. Again, thanks, Devon, for this opportunity, as well as the Farm Bureau and the Hawaii Agricultural Foundation. This is a pivotal election for all of us. We're in the middle of an unprecedented economic situation, especially in our lifetimes for sure. As your mayor, I assure you, I will work lockstep with your industries to get you out of this recovery, to get you stronger and hopefully better than ever. But we need to work together. As your mayor, I will provide as much funding as I can to help you through this economic situation, whether it's more CARES Act funding, whether it's another second stimulus of funding, whether it's providing city lands or city infrastructure to help you with your farming and agricultural needs, whether it's helping our restaurant industry through this pandemic by allowing open spaces outside their restaurants to increase their seating capacity. I will be there to support you. You're an important part of our industry, of our economy. It's essential that we do whatever we can to protect you. And so I thank you again for your time. I'm committed to helping all of you, and I humbly ask for your vote. Aloha and mahalo.
Thank you very much, Keith. All right, Rick, your turn.
Devin, I want to thank you as well, and Denise and everybody else that was involved with it, certainly the Hawaii Agricultural Foundation and the Hawaii Farm Bureau. And as I said at the outset tonight, this panel tonight really stretched me. And I was really grateful for that because we've been mired in a lot of other details, but I've certainly been aware. But just doing the research and trying to answer the questions that you asked tonight, actually for me came as a form of relief, if you will, because we've been asked repeatedly in light of this economic disaster that we're in, how we're going to diversify our economy, given the tourism is going to come back very slow. And we've talked repeatedly about, people have talked about doing it for the since John Burns was governor, never really quite able to do it. And I've been of a strong belief that as entrepreneurs, if you will, we need to look at the ideas that are there, the innovation, the things that are around us in sectors that we can build on and add. And as I began to look at this, I started to get very, very excited. We've talked a lot about the construction industry, but I think there's some real possibilities here to create agriculture and farming for food sustenance as a business. I said earlier tonight about 10%, a 10% shift in our local produce, $313 million. I think we can look to the things that we can really grow here and make ourselves as sustained as possible and just import a lot less food. I think that's a great business model. It's so fundamental. So I'm excited about my understanding right now of how much the mayor can make a difference in this. And I promise you, on a going forward basis, this will be a big priority of mine because I just think it's good all the way around for everyone. So I thank you tonight for this opportunity. I bring a lifetime of work to this job. I've lived in Hawaii since 1965. My work is what it is. People know what it is. And I'm just really committed to trying to be the best mayor you could ever ask for. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very much. Once again, thank you to our mayoral candidates, Rick Blangiardi and Keith Amemiya. We appreciate you both being here with us to talk about issues that are affecting our local agricultural and food industries and engaging with our community. And boy, you guys are busy. And look, wow, we did it with a minute to spare. So congratulate yourselves and pat yourselves on the back. Thank you everyone for tuning in and listening to the forum. Please make sure that you vote. Good luck, gentlemen, in your quest for mayor. We wish you all the luck. If any of you would like to support Hawaii Agricultural Foundation and Hawaii Farm Bureau Federation, please consider making a donation or becoming a member. More information on how you can support is in the chat box that you see over there. If you can, please also support our local restaurants by choosing takeout, delivery, or dine-in where possible. To find a restaurant near you, visit foodagogo.org. This is Devon Nekoba. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to the staff here who've been, there's like 20 people working over here to make us all look good. So thank you once again, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Mahalo. Have a great evening.
Good night. Thank you. Mahalo. Bye-bye.